My name is Tyler Grant. I'm 33 years old, and I spend my days sorting through bent fenders, shattered windshields, and the quiet paperwork of other people's accidents. I drive a 12-year-old Silverado I rebuilt myself in the garage behind my rented duplex, the one with the oil-stained concrete floor and the single bare bulb that hums when it rains. I have 2 kids. Mason, who is 8 and already asks questions like a little philosopher, and Lila, 5, who still believes every cloud is shaped like something she can name. Shared custody. I get them every Thursday afternoon and every other weekend, and I have never once been late. Not when the claims stack up at work, not when my back aches from crawling under someone else's wrecked SUV, not even when the world feels like it's leaning too hard on my shoulders. On paper, I look steady. Decent credit, reliable job, kids who eat their vegetables most nights and know how to say please and thank you. But there is another version of me that has been running on empty for 14 years. The version who learned, somewhere between childhood and fatherhood, that the safest way to be loved by my family was to stay useful and never ask for anything back. That version finally died on a cool October evening at a steakhouse called the Branding Iron, the kind of place with dark wood booths, soft country music playing low, the kind of place where families celebrate things that matter. Mason held my hand a little tighter than usual as we made our way to the big round table in the back. Lila skipped beside me, her dress swishing against her knees. My parents were already there, Dad ordering a round of drinks before anyone had even opened a menu. Courtney and Jared arrived laughing, her arm looped through his like they had already stepped into the next chapter of their lives. I felt the old reflex kick in as soon as the waiter handed the heavy leather menus, the quiet mental math that had become second nature. I smiled at Lila when she pointed to the kids' chicken tenders and asked if she could have the ones with the smiley face ketchup. Courtney waved the waiter over with easy confidence. We'll start with the loaded nachos for the table, extra jalapenos, and maybe 2 bottles of that Cabernet, tonight's special. The air felt thick with the scent of grilled meat and warm bread. Mason leaned against my side, quiet in the way he gets when he senses the adults are circling something important. I looked across the table at the people who had shaped so much of my life and felt something shift inside my chest. Something that had been bending for 14 years, finally reaching its limit. The first round of drinks arrived. Dad raised his glass. To Courtney and Jared, may your life together be as strong as this family. Everyone cheered. I lifted my water and smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach the place where it used to live. This was supposed to be a night about love and new beginnings. Instead, it felt like the beginning of the end of something I had carried for too long. The weeks leading up to that dinner had felt like every other stretch of my life, quiet on the surface, heavy underneath. I spent my days at the office measuring dents and writing estimates, then came home to make boxed macaroni with cut-up hot dogs for the kids on my nights, or fall into bed exhausted on the nights they were with Sarah. The old Silverado needed new brake pads again, but I kept putting it off because the money always seemed to find somewhere else to go first. 14 years of being the one who could be counted on. That was the role I inherited without anyone ever asking if I wanted it. When Courtney was 20 and her roommate skipped out on rent, I drove 2 hours with a cashier's check because she sounded scared on the phone. When Dad's riding mower threw a belt the summer Mason was 3, I spent my vacation day under the machine in their backyard while Leela napped in the shade of the oak tree. When Jared's transmission started slipping right before he proposed, Courtney sent me the quote and a heart emoji. I wired the difference without thinking twice. Each time, it felt like the decent thing to do. Each time, it left a little less in the account for the things I wanted to give my own kids. A bigger Christmas, a weekend at the lake, maybe just the peace of not checking my balance before saying yes to ice cream. Sarah noticed it before I did. The night she told me she wanted the divorce, we sat at the kitchen table after the kids were asleep. She didn't raise her voice. She just said, "Ty, I love the man who shows up for everyone else, but I miss the man who shows up for us." I didn't have an answer that night. I only had the same reflex I'd always had. Apologize, fix it, make it right. But some cracks can't be patched with another transfer or another Saturday spent on someone else's problem. The kids felt the shift, even when we tried to hide it. Mason started asking why Grandpa always called after bedtime. Leela would climb into my lap and pat my cheek when my phone rang, like she could sense the weight it carried. I told them it was just family stuff, but children hear what we don't say louder than what we do. Courtney's engagement party was supposed to be simple, a family dinner at the branding iron to celebrate the ring and the future. I had helped pick the date, quietly called the restaurant to reserve the back room when Mom said the regular spots were booked, and told everyone not to worry about the deposit. That was me, making it easy, keeping the peace, staying useful. By the time we sat down that night, the table was already warm with laughter and the smell of seared steaks and garlic bread. Dad had ordered a pitcher of beer and a bottle of red wine before the menus even made it around. Courtney glowed in a soft blue dress, Jared's arms slung across the back of her chair like he belonged there forever. Mom kept touching Courtney's hand and saying how proud she was. I sat between Mason and Leela, Sarah across from us, her quiet presence a steady reminder that we could still do this part right for the kids. The appetizers arrived, loaded nachos piled high with cheese and jalapenos, the kind of dish that disappears fast when everyone is in a good mood. Courtney reached for another chip and laughed. Tyler always knows how to make these nights perfect. Seriously, big brother, you're the best. Dad raised his glass again. That's my boy, always has been, steady as they come. I smiled because that's what I did, but inside, the old familiar math was running. I saw the second bottle of wine being uncorked. I saw Jared ordering the $32 ribeye without glancing at the price. I saw Mom ordering the surf and turf for her and Dad because it's a celebration. And I felt the slow tightening in my chest, the same one I'd felt for years every time another request landed softly in my lap. Mason leaned into my side and whispered, "Dad, can I have the chicken strips with fries?" His voice was small, careful, like he already knew we were measuring things tonight. I nodded and ruffled his hair. "Sure, buddy." Leela was drawing invisible pictures on the condensation of her water glass, humming to herself. She looked up at me with those wide eyes and asked, "Is there chocolate cake later?" I told her we'd see. The conversation moved around the table like a current. Dad told the story about the time Courtney tried to bake cookies for the school fair and set off the smoke alarm. Everyone laughed. Jared added his own tale about proposing on the lake, how he almost dropped the ring in the water. Courtney squeezed his hand and looked happier than I'd seen her in months. Sarah caught my eye across the table and gave me a small, knowing nod, the kind that said she remembered all the times I had made these moments possible. Then Courtney turned to me, her smile bright and effortless. "So, big brother, you're handling the rest of the night, right? Like always, make sure everyone has what they need." The words landed lightly, the way they always did, just another casual assumption wrapped in gratitude. Dad clapped and clapped me on the shoulder. "That's right, Tyler's got the family covered. Insurance man through and through." I felt Mason shift beside me. Leela stopped drawing on her glass and looked up, sensing the change in the air even if she couldn't name it. Sarah's hand tightened slightly around her water glass, but she stayed quiet, letting me decide what came next. The waiter returned with more bread and asked if we were ready to order entrees. The table buzzed with excitement. Courtney pointed to the menu and said, "We should all get something nice. It's not every day your big sister gets engaged." I looked at my kids. Mason was watching me with those serious eyes that seemed too old for 8 years old. Leela was still humming, but her little fingers had gone still on the table. Something inside me, the part that had been saying yes for 14 years, finally stopped bending. I took a slow breath, the kind that fills your lungs with the smell of grilled meat and warm wood and the faint trace of something ending. The conflict wasn't loud yet. It was just a quiet click in my chest, like a lock turning for the first time in years. And I knew, sitting there between my kids with the weight of every past yes pressing down, that tonight the answer was going to be different. The waiter stood there with his notepad, patient as stone, while the table waited for me to speak. The smell of seared meat and warm bread still hung in the air, but it felt heavier now, like smoke before a storm. Courtney's words kept echoing in my head. "You're handling the rest of the night, right? Like always?" They had landed so casually, wrapped in that bright smile she'd worn since she was little. Dad was already nodding along, his glass halfway to his lips, as if the matter was settled before it had even begun. I looked at Mason first, his small shoulder pressed against my arm, warm and trusting. Then at Leela, who had stopped humming and was watching me with those wide, unblinking eyes that saw more than most adults gave her credit for. Sarah sat across from us, her expression calm but alert, the way she got when she knew something important was about to happen. I took another slow breath, letting the restaurant sounds, low conversations at other tables, the clink of silverware, the faint country guitar, fill the space around me. My voice came out steady, almost ordinary, the same tone I used at work when explaining a claim denial to someone who thought the world owed them more. "Could we get separate checks tonight?" I said. "One for my parents, one for Courtney and Jared, and one for me and the kids." The table went still in that thick, syrupy way that happens when everyone realizes the conversation has just stepped off the edge of normal. Courtney blinked, her smile faltering for the first time all evening. "What do you mean separate?" Dad let out a short laugh, the kind he used when he thought someone was joking but wasn't quite sure. "Sit down, Tyler. Don't be silly. Put your card down like always. We'll sort it later." I hadn't stood up. I was still sitting right there between my children, but the words felt like they carried weight anyway. "I'm not being silly. I'm asking for separate checks by household." Jared leaned back in his chair, his easy grin tightening at the edges. "Come on, man. It's a celebration. Don't make it weird." Mom reached across the table and touched my wrist with her cool fingers, the same gentle pressure she had used my whole life to steer things back to smooth. "Honey, it's your sister's night. Let's not turn this into something it doesn't have to be." I felt Mason shift beside me again, his breathing a little shallower. Leela's small hand found mine under the table and squeezed. I squeezed back, slow and deliberate, grounding myself in the only thing that truly mattered in that moment. The waiter, professional to the core, nodded once. "I can split them however you'd like, sir. Would you like me to itemize everything?" "Yes, please," I said. My voice stayed even. No heat, no volume. Just the quiet finality of a man who'd read the fine print on too many policies and finally decided to apply it to his own life. Courtney's eyes darted between me and the half-eaten nachos. "Tyler, seriously? You're going to do this right now on my engagement night?" I looked at her, really looked, at the woman who'd grown up knowing I would always catch whatever fell, at the sister who had never once had to wonder if the bill would be covered. "I'm not doing anything to your night, Courtney. I'm choosing how I spend my money tonight." Dad's face darkened, the proud smile from earlier sliding away. He set his glass down harder than necessary. "You're embarrassing my mother and me in front of everyone. This is family. We don't do separate checks like strangers." "My family," I said, glancing at Mason and Leela, "is sitting right here with me, and they're not embarrassed." Sarah didn't speak, but she reached across and rested her hand lightly on Leela's arm, a quiet anchor. The kids stayed silent, but I could feel the way the air had changed for them too, like they were watching their dad become someone new in real time. The waiter excused himself to prepare the checks, moving with the calm of a man who had seen versions of this scene before. In the silence that followed, Courtney whispered something to Jared. Mom's tight smile appeared, the one usually meant, "Stop before this gets worse." Dad crossed his arms, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say yet. I stayed seated, hands resting on the table, breathing in the mesquite smoke and the faint scent of Leela's strawberry shampoo. Every past yes rose up in my memory. The roof repairs, the rent help, the late-night wires, the cosigns, the quiet Saturdays I gave away. They had never been thanked so much as expected, and tonight, for the first time, I let myself feel the full weight of what that expectation had cost me. When the waiter returned, he carried 3 separate folders. He placed one in front of my parents, one in front of Courtney and Jared, and one in front of me and the kids. I opened mine slowly. The total for me and the kids, 2 simple kids' chicken strips with fries, my own modest sirloin, and waters all around, came to $78 before tip. Reasonable. Honest. Dad slid his check toward me with one finger, the leather folder stopping just short of my plate. Last chance, son. Don't make this a bigger deal than it needs to be. I didn't touch it. I looked at him, then at Mom, then at Courtney, whose eyes were bright with something between disbelief and anger. I've covered a lot of checks at tables like this, I said, my voice low and clear. I've fixed roofs, wired money, co-signed loans, and paid deposits that were supposed to be temporary. I'm not a bank. I'm not the family safety net. I'm a father who needs to show his kids that their dad's yes still means something when it matters most to them. Courtney's voice cracked slightly. It's just dinner, Tyler. You're really going to punish me on my engagement night over pasta and steak? It's not punishment. It's the first time in 14 years I'm not pretending the signal doesn't exist. The signal that my time, my money, and my energy are always available, while yours are yours to spend freely. The table sat in heavy silence. Mason looked up at me, his expression serious but not scared. Leela said in a quiet voice, only just loud enough for me to hear, "Daddy, is everything okay?" I leaned down and kissed the top of her head. Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart. We're just learning a new way to do things. I signed my check, added a fair tip, and closed the folder. Then I helped Leela with her jacket and reminded Mason to grab his small backpack. Sarah stood as well, gathering her things without a word, her presence solid and unshaken. Dad's voice dropped low, the kind of quiet that used to make me fold. You're walking out on your sister's engagement dinner. I'm walking out with my children. We'll talk tomorrow if you want, but tonight I'm choosing them first. Mom started to speak, her voice soft and pleading, but I shook my head gently. I love you all, but I'm done being the only one who bends. We moved toward the heavy wooden door. The October air hit us as soon as we stepped out, sharp, clean, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and distant rain. Mason slipped his hand into mine. Leela swung between us for a moment, her dress catching the parking lot lights. In the truck, as I buckled them in, Leela asked from the back seat, "Are we still having cake?" I smiled into the rearview mirror. Not tonight, but we'll have pancakes in the morning, with extra syrup. Mason was quiet for a long minute, then said, "Dad, you didn't yell." "No," I said, starting the engine. I didn't need to. The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full instead of empty. For the first time in years, the weight on my shoulders felt different. Not lighter yet, but shifted, like something long bent had finally straightened. Back at the duplex, I made sure the kids brushed their teeth and read them one extra story. When they were asleep, I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and listened to the house settle around me. The old version of Tyler, the one who never said no, had finally been laid to rest at a steakhouse table, and the new one, still raw and uncertain, was just beginning to breathe. The drive home from the branding iron felt shorter than it should have, the October night pressing cool against the truck windows while Mason and Leela dozed in the back. I kept the radio low, some old country song about second chances playing soft enough not to wake them. When we pulled into the driveway of the duplex, the porch light clicked on automatically, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. I carried Leela inside first, her head heavy on my shoulder, then came back for Mason, who walked half asleep but still managed to hold my hand the whole way. That night, I slept better than I had in months, a deep, dreamless kind of rest that left me waking to the sound of birds and the faint smell of coffee I had set to brew the night before. But the quiet didn't last. By morning, the phone had become a living thing. It buzzed and lit up on the kitchen counter while I stood at the stove flipping pancakes for the kids. 23 texts before 9 o'clock, missed calls from Mom, Dad, and Courtney. The family group chat had turned into a slow avalanche, starting with photos of the untouched dessert plate at the restaurant, then shifting into careful questions that carried sharp edges underneath. Mason watched me from the table, syrup already streaking his chin. "Is that Grandpa?" "Not right now," I said, keeping my voice even as I slid another pancake onto his plate. Leela hummed while she colored, her small feet swinging under the chair. I let the phone keep buzzing. For once, I didn't reach for it like it was an emergency I had to fix. Sarah stopped by later that morning to drop off the kids' school bags she had forgotten the night before. She found me at the kitchen table with my laptop open, tabs spread across the screen like evidence in a claim file. Streaming subscriptions, shared emergency savings account, the Costco card I had added Dad to years ago. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, studying me the way she used to when we were still trying to make things work. "You okay?" she asked. "I think so," I said, "just cleaning some things up." She didn't push. Instead, she nodded toward the screen. "You need any help with that?" "I've got it this time." She studied my face for a long moment, then said something that landed heavier than I expected. "Last night, that was the first time in years I saw the man I married, not the one who was always fixing everyone else's mess. Just you." The words sat between us, quiet and honest. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not pain exactly, but the kind of ache that comes when old scaffolding finally gives way, and you realize how much room there is underneath. Sarah didn't stay long. She kissed the kids goodbye and left me with that single sentence ringing like a clear bell. The real fallout arrived in pieces throughout the day. Mom called around noon, her voice thick with the disappointment she had perfected over decades. "Your father didn't sleep, Tyler. He kept pacing the living room. You humiliated him in front of your sister on her special night." "I split a check," I said, stirring the leftover pancake batter slowly. "That's all." She moved through her usual notes, softness first, then the gentle reminder of how much they had always done for me, then the oldest pressure point. "Courtney is struggling with all the wedding planning. You know how sensitive she gets." I listened without arguing. When she finally said, "Your father wants you to apologize," I answered simply, "I won't." Silence stretched on the line. Then, quieter, "He wants his name taken off the Costco account. I'll cancel the add-on this afternoon. There's no need to be vindictive, baby." "I'm not being vindictive, I'm being consistent." She hung up after that, the click sharp and final. Dad's texts came in 4 separate messages an hour later, each one landing like a hammer tap. "You embarrassed your mother. Be a man about this. Don't come by the house until you can act right." Then 60 seconds after the last one, almost as an afterthought, "The gutters are full again. Bring the ladder when you get a chance." I stared at the screen for a long time, then set the phone face down and finished my coffee. The old reflex, to jump up, grab tools, make it right, rose up strong, but I let it pass me through and kept sitting there. Sarah's message arrived that evening, longer and sharper. No greeting, just a wall of hurt. "You made Mom cry. Jared said you were rude to the whole table. Dad is rethinking how much he helps with the wedding. You know money isn't everything. Can you at least send $200 for the deposit on the photographer? They sprung it on us last minute." I typed and deleted at least 10 different replies. In the end, I sent back 2 words: "No." Her response came instantly. "So that's how it's going to be?" "Yes, that's how it's going to be." The days that followed felt strange and quiet, like stepping into a house after all the furniture had been moved out.
I canceled the shared streaming accounts one by one, Hulu, Disney Plus, even the music service they all used but never thanked me for. I closed the joint emergency savings account that had held only $43 because Dad had quietly withdrawn everything else over the years as cash for emergencies. I removed his name from the Costco add-on and felt no satisfaction, only a strange, clean emptiness. Then came the twist I hadn't seen coming. It arrived on a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks after the dinner. I was sitting in the Silverado in the parking lot outside the duplex after dropping the kids at Sarah's, the engine still ticking as it cooled. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, Sarah's voice came through, softer than I had heard her in a long time. "I've been thinking about what happened at the restaurant, about what you did." I waited, watching the streetlights flicker on. She continued, "I was angry at first, not because you said no, but because it took you so long. But then I realized something. That night, you weren't just protecting your wallet, you were protecting Mason and Leela from learning that their dad's worth is measured by how much he can give away. You showed them that no can be an act of love, too, the right kind." Her words landed deep, cracking open a realization I hadn't fully faced yet. All those years of saying yes hadn't just drained me, they had quietly taught my kids that love meant disappearing into other people's needs. That night at the steakhouse, in the simplest way possible, I had started teaching them something different. I sat there long after we hung up, the truck growing cold around me, staring at the dark windows of the duplex. Grief and relief moved through me in slow waves. Grief for the family I had tried so hard to hold together with my own hands. Relief for the man I was finally becoming, the one who could sit at his own table without calculating the cost to everyone else. Around 2 in the morning, I finally went inside, made a cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. I started a new list, not of things I owed, but of small things I wanted to give Mason and Leela without anyone else's shadow over them. Saturday pancakes with extra chocolate chips, a new helmet for Mason's bike, the dance class Leela had been asking about for months. The old life was still knocking, voicemails from Courtney, a late-night knock at the door I didn't answer, but for the first time, the knocking didn't feel like something I had to open. I was learning, slowly and painfully, what it meant to be reliable for the right people, and that lesson, it turned out, was just beginning.
The weeks that followed moved in a strange, quiet rhythm I'd never known before. Mornings started earlier, not because of frantic phone calls or emergency texts, but because I chose them that way. I woke up, made coffee in the small kitchen of the duplex, and stood at the window watching the first light touch the old Silverado in the driveway. There was space now, space where obligation used to live. It felt both freeing and terrifying, like stepping onto a porch after a long winter and realizing the view had always been wider than I allowed myself to see. I kept the promises I made to myself and to the kids. Saturday mornings became pancake mornings, the kitchen filled with the smell of butter and vanilla, while Mason measured flour with careful precision, and Leela stirred with her whole body, flour dusting her cheeks like snow. One weekend, I took them to the store and let them pick out a new bike helmet for Mason, bright blue with racing stripes, and signed Leela up for the Tuesday evening dance class she had pointed at in the community center flyer for months. Small things, ordinary things, but they belonged to us without anyone else's shadow falling across them. The family's noise didn't disappear overnight. It faded slowly, like static on an old radio. Courtney sent a few more messages, some angry, some pleading, one that simply said she missed the way things used to be. I answered honestly, but briefly. I loved her. I always would, but I could no longer be the person who kept her life afloat at the expense of my own. Dad drove by the duplex once late at night. The Ring camera caught him standing on the porch, hands in his jacket pockets, staring at the door for a long minute before he turned and left without knocking.
Mom called twice more, her voice softer each time, testing the waters with stories about Bridge Club and how the garden was doing. I listened, but I didn't offer to come fix anything. Not the gutters, not the leaky faucet she mentioned in passing, not the small favor that always turned into something larger. I canceled the last of the shared accounts, removed my name from the old co-signed credit card that still carried a small balance from years ago, audited every automatic payment, and felt a quiet satisfaction when the monthly total dropped by more than $200, money that now stayed where it belonged. There were moments of doubt, late at night when the house was silent and the old habit of usefulness whispered that I was being selfish. But then I would walk down the hallway and check on Mason and Leela sleeping in their rooms, their faces peaceful, and the doubt would settle. This wasn't selfishness. This was stewardship of my time, my energy, and the example I wanted to give them. One Tuesday evening after dropping Leela at dance class, Mason and I sat in the truck waiting for her. He was quiet for a long time, then asked the question I knew had been sitting with him since the restaurant. "Are we still going to Grandpa's on Sundays?" "Not for a while," I told him. "Because of the dinner?" "Because of a lot of dinners," I said, "and because I need to show you and your sister that it's okay to protect what matters most." He thought about that, his small hands folded in his lap. Grandpa said it was rude what he told Leela about eating later. "Yeah, it was," I said. "You didn't get mad, though." "I got clear, which is better in the long run." Mason nodded slowly, the kind of nod that told me he was storing the moment away to understand later. "Okay, can we still have pancakes tomorrow?" "Always." Leela came out of the community center, flushed and happy, twirling in the parking lot with her little skirt flaring. She climbed into her booster seat and immediately told us about learning to spin without falling. Her voice filled the truck, bright and unbroken, and I felt something settle deep in my chest. This was what the boundary had made room for, space for their joy to grow without the constant weight of everyone else's expectations pressing in. That same week, my grandmother, Nana Ruth, called out of the blue. She was 84, sharp as ever, living in a small house on the edge of town with a garden that still produced tomatoes in October. "Heard you stirred the pot," she said without preamble. "Your mother called crying, your father grumbled, your sister called twice. When all three reach out in one day, the one who stayed quiet is usually the one who finally got it right." I laughed, the real kind that starts in the chest. She invited us over for biscuits on Sunday. We went. She fed the kids warm biscuits with honey and told stories about my grandfather, who once told his own brothers no about a truck he'd lent them for 6 months. They called him heartless, she said, eyes twinkling. He slept better for 20 years after that. The afternoon felt healing in a way I hadn't expected. Simple, grounded, full of stories instead of requests. On an ordinary Tuesday night, a few weeks later, the three of us sat at our own kitchen table. No restaurant lights, no heavy menus, no invisible tallies running in the background. I had made spaghetti with meat sauce. Nothing fancy, just good, warm food. Mason twirled his noodles carefully. Leela had sauce on her nose and was giggling about it. The radio played low in the background, an old song about home and second chances. I looked at my kids across the simple wooden table and realized this was what love looked like when it stopped being measured by how much I could give away. Love looked like sitting at a table where everyone present got to eat, where no one's plate waited while food was boxed up for people who weren't even there, where my yes belonged first to the 2 small humans who called me dad. I don't hate my family. I never did. Some part of me still hopes they learn something from all of this, though I've stopped making that my responsibility. This isn't a story about revenge or punishment. It's a story about what happens when the most reliable person in the room finally decides to become reliable for himself first. I'm a dad now, fully, without apology. Not a safety net, not a second wallet, not the man who absorbs every bill and drives home in silence, calling it love. Love, I've decided, is clearer than that. It's the steady hand on a small shoulder. It's the promise of pancakes tomorrow. It's the quiet strength to say no so that your children can learn what a healthy yes feels like. If someone in your life has come to treat your reliability like oxygen while your own needs have become a punchline, this is your quiet sign. You don't have to leave loudly. You don't have to deliver a speech. You just have to mean it when you say no. That's all. That's the whole thing.